Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and the journey to the launch of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond continues. A couple days ago I talked about how it looks like things are about to begin, that we should get ready, how it looked like Nintendo was teasing the art book for next week, and how also they announced the Kirby Direct to happen this week, which I've already seen. I'll talk a little about that in a day or two. I'll be getting to the other Nintendo stuff very soon, but there's just so much Metroid Prime 4 stuff happening. But yes, there have been different things happening suggesting that Nintendo's positioning everything for a bigger Metroid Prime 4 marketing campaign. And then literally the day afterwards, we got a mega influx of information about Metroid Prime 4, which we talked about in yesterday's video. A huge info blowout showing off new art for characters like Sylux, another Lamorne that we have not seen before. We've learned different details about different mechanics in the game, giant boss fights, incredible things that we did not anticipate about the game, other areas, many vast expanses. Like, if you're curious about all that stuff, definitely check out yesterday's video. There's so much to cover there. It's huge. Like, I'm already left convinced that Metroid Prime 4 might just straight up be the best Nintendo game in years. Like, better than Mario Wonder, better than Donkey Kong Bonanza, better than The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. That's how crazy all this information seems. Metroid Prime 4 is looking like an incredible game from everything we are hearing. And last night, very late last night, we got a leak of literal new gameplay footage of boss fights in Metroid Prime 4. We've been missing out on seeing more boss fights in Prime 4, and I still think there's a lot left to be shown here, but we literally have new gameplay footage of Metroid Prime 4 boss fights leaked by who? Nintendo themselves. There are two videos that are titled Nintendo Switch 2 Power Up Your Holidays. They're literally two commercials on the Nintendo of America YouTube site that are unlisted, that were not intended to be shown to the public. In other words, these have been leaked, and they show off some interesting things. So we're going to be breaking that down and also talking about this Metroid Prime 4 Direct rumor. So there's a lot to get into today. Do you find yourself feeling tired, unable to take a good nap during the day from wherever you may be? Then perhaps you are in need of a soft, comfortable sleep mask that blocks out all light. Fortunately, Manta Sleep, the sponsor for today's video, has just that, a quality sleep mask. This sleep mask has super soft, comfy cushions that cover your eyes and block out all light. It's easy to adjust to different sizes, and it feels great to wear, and it's helped me personally fit in just a bit more rest during my days. So if you're looking to improve your sleep and energy, check out the Manta Sleep Mask using the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. So first, let's go back to this idea of how there's a Kirby Air Riders Direct this week, leaving next week vacant for something else big. Because we are getting a big game release on November 6th. That will be Hyrule's Age of Imprisonment, so that week will likely be focused on that game the first week of November. And after that week, we'll be pretty close to Metroid Prime 4, less than a month. And usually when we get game-specific Nintendo Directs, they're usually about 4 to 7 weeks before the game comes out. So by the second week of November, we would be less than 4 weeks away. We'd be talking about being 3 weeks away. So it's possible Nintendo waits all the way until then to have a Nintendo Direct, but what seems more realistic is that they're going to have it sooner. And really, the only vacancy left is next week, the week of Halloween, where we're also seeing the release of the Metroid Prime 1-3 art book. But similar to the Kirby Air Riders Direct and where that may be positioned, there was another possible Direct that we've been talking about that might impact when Nintendo would have a Metroid Prime 4 Direct. And that's this idea of another partner showcase. Now it looks like that partner showcase, not saying it was rumored or leaked, it was just kind of theorized because there's a lot of third-party announcements that were needed to be had. Those third-party announcements have been had, they've been made. So for example, Fallout 4, newly announced for Nintendo Switch 2, happened today. Another big one. Assassin's Creed Shadows. This one we were expecting to be announced really soon for Switch 2. It's officially been announced for Switch 2. It's happening. And it's not being saved for a partner showcase announcement, so that's big news. Now, another one is Elden Ring. Elden Ring was slated for this year of 2025. We were waiting on an update for this game. We were not sure if they were going to delay it or not. It was starting to seem like they would, given how long we've been waiting, but there was a thought that maybe they were saving an announcement on the release date in a partner showcase. Well, today also, Elden Ring has been announced to be getting delayed, as you see here from the official Elden Ring account. It reads, "While development on Elden Ring Tarnished Edition continues wholeheartedly toward release, we have decided to move the launch to 2026 to allow time for performance adjustments. We apologize to players looking forward to the game, and thank you for your patience and support." So it's good to finally get this announcement here just in regards to Elden Ring. There was a lot of concerns about performance of this game because we've seen multiple builds and the performance was poor. Now we've seen some later builds and it does seem like it's improving, but still it looks like they are delaying the game to 2026 to make sure it's running well for Switch 2 when it does come out. But in terms of the Metroid Prime 4 situation, all this news strongly suggests that there is not going to be a partner showcase in late October, early November. It's not going to happen. So that's one less presentation that could get in the way of there being a Metroid Prime 4 Direct. And with the Kirby Air Riders Direct now out of the way, we know pretty much everything we need to know about that game. Really, all that's left is maybe a Mario Movie Direct and a Metroid Prime 4 Direct. At this point, there's probably not going to be a Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment Direct. We're way too close to release. Likely what's going to happen is that there's going to be like a big trailer or something like that really soon, and then we're going to hear about journalists' impressions of the game, and then the game is going to come out. And as for the Mario Movie Direct, that's not confirmed either. However, with the first Mario movie that came out in 2023, there were actually 3 Mario Movie Directs about the game. This time around, they teased the Mario movie in a September Direct, so maybe you can count that as like the first Mario Movie Direct, even though it wasn't its own thing. I think there's probably going to be at least one more showing of the movie this year, but that could be saved for the Game Awards in early December after Metroid Prime 4 comes out, or in a Mario Movie Direct, still probably in December after the game comes out. I don't think they're going to talk about this movie until they get out all their games. Which brings us to the Metroid Prime 4 Direct. Great chance it happens next week simply because there's not really nothing else that's going to happen next week except maybe for a Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment trailer. So there's definitely space for both. But there is a rumor suggesting the Prime 4 Direct may be happening in November instead. So friend of the channel Attack the Backlog, who has heard some things accurately in the past as we've discussed on the channel in the past, here said October is the Kirby time, November is the Metroid time, implying that the Metroid Prime 4 Direct is in November because obviously Metroid Prime 4 is coming out in December and Kirby's obviously coming out in November. The Directs come out the month beforehand. Now, this might just be speculation. However, he does say here, when William Joseph on Twitter says, "I honestly don't see them doing a Metroid Direct," Attack the Backlog says, "I heard 3 different things today." So clearly he's hearing some things, perhaps conflicting information, but that he's hearing some things about there being a Metroid Direct. Now, we've also heard an update from Nash Weedle in regards to this Metroid Prime 4 Direct. As he says here on Twitter, "Metroid Prime 4 Direct in danger? A few days ago, I was told about that, but it would seem strange to me and a bad decision from Nintendo. I don't want to believe it, and I trust that the Nintendo Direct will finally happen." So, Nash Weedle still believes that there's going to be a Metroid Prime 4 Direct. However, he is saying that he's heard some conflicting information, very similar to Attack the Backlog. That said, I would say that there should be a Metroid Prime 4 Direct. Like, of course there should be a Metroid Prime 4 Direct. I think the people who think that there won't be a Direct is mostly because they don't think Nintendo would want to market this game, or that they don't think they should share any more information on this game. But if Nintendo's sharing information on most games, why wouldn't they for Metroid? Now, maybe they handle it similar to Tears of the Kingdom, where it's not necessarily a Direct, but some sort of gameplay demonstration. Whatever you want to call it, I think they need to talk about more about Metroid Prime 4. There needs to be presentation of information about this game. What's been shown so far is not good enough. And no, the information we covered yesterday, while it is a lot and it is amazing, is not something that would replace a Metroid Prime 4 Direct, because this all came from Nintendo Dream Magazine in Japan. This is obscure information that journalists have found and have translated. This isn't something that's been put together in a significant way to present to the world to market this game to as much people as possible. In other words, there's no way that this information replaces the need for a Direct. I think a lot of this information will likely show up in a direct, and more so, and done in a way that's very exciting to, hopefully, fairly broad audience. But we haven't seen anything to replace a Prime 4 Direct. We've gone 2 Kirby Directs, we've gone a Mario Kart World Direct, we've gone a Donkey Kong Bonanza Direct. I fully expect there to be a Metroid Prime 4 Direct. And with these latest leaks, I'm actually further believing this to be the case, because it looks like Nintendo indeed does have a special marketing campaign planned for Metroid Prime 4. As we said earlier, there have been 2 commercials that have been leaked. They are unlisted on Nintendo's YouTube page of Metroid Prime 4 marketing for the holidays. Before getting into the analysis on these leaks though, let me simply point out that I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you find yourself enjoying this video or my other videos, I would very much appreciate your support in whatever form that may come in. Subscriptions, likes, comments, sharing, hyping the video, it all makes a big difference. I appreciate you, and thank you. Now, I do not want to run the risk of this video being taken down. Just last week, I made a video about the Pokemon leaks, and none of the leaks were an issue, actually, funnily enough. It was me sharing in what I believe to have been an artistic recreation of animations for Mega Feraligatr, which only took up 30 seconds of the video, if even that. So I'm not going to show any of these commercials that Nintendo has accidentally shared to more than people than they wanted to too early on. However, I will have an article linked in the description below where you can find this information, but I'm going to be talking about this footage and breaking it down and the meaning of it, because there's actually a few different things here that are very, very interesting. So the first of these 2 I'm going to talk about is the footage shown. It's some dude playing the game in mouse mode. They are showcasing that. They are showcasing the 120 FPS. That's cool stuff. But they also have a few clips showing off more footage of Carvex. So we've actually seen Carvex before from the View Roast trailer of Metroid Prime 4. Now we're just getting more looks of this boss fight. It's clearly a very early on boss fight. You look at the amount of missiles Samus has, it's just 10. You look at the energy tanks Samus has, very few. So this is an early on boss fight, maybe one of the first few boss fights we have on View Roast. But we just see a little bit more footage of Carvex, and Carvex does seem to be a little bit more grand than what we saw from that View Roast trailer, because we see that branches can extend out and reach, and there are projectiles that we can shoot. So there's a little bit more to the boss fight, which does not surprise me. Why would we see everything of a single boss fight in just 2 seconds? It's going to have different modes, attacks and such, different patterns, depending on how far you are in the boss. But what I will point out here is that at the core of Carvex, it does look like there's some sort of weird bluish membrane with a reddish nucleus in the middle, looking somewhat like a Metroid. And I think this is important to talk about because we've already seen that Metroids do take over enemies and power them up. We see that with the first boss fight from the Prime 4 Treehouse footage. So it's likely that Metroids have powered up Carvex as well, at least based off what we're seeing of that weird sort of core that looks very Metroid-like. It's very similar to what we see all over Aberex, the giant superpowered space pirate. Moving on to the second ad though, it shows off another boss fight, this one we have not seen before. This boss appears to be later into the game because Samus has more energy tanks and more missiles, but there's something about the missiles which we'll be getting to in a moment here. However, the boss this time around is named Zelios. It's a giant round structure with a whole bunch of hexagonal pads and some sort of nucleus in the middle that shoots out green electricity. And to also note that within it at its core, there is also kind of like a bluish membrane, although this one's a little bit more green to match its electricity and the energy coursing through its hexagonal pads that are forming a giant orb. And within it is kind of like a pinkish purple like nucleus. It's a little bit different from what we've seen of the Metroid stuff from Aberex and perhaps also Carvex, but it is similar, so I'm pointing it out here. It could very well be different, but maybe it's just like an electrocuted version of Metroid nucleus at the core of this thing. But what's also interesting about this boss, its name Zelios reminds me of a boss from Metroid Prime 3, Helios, the only difference being the first letter, X versus H. So I think it's likely that this is meant to be somewhat of a reference to Helios from Metroid Prime 3, who also shares a very round-like structure. It's mechanized, it's all about its machinery. It uses a whole bunch of drones to protect itself and attack you. It's a mechanical boss, not an organic boss, very similar to what we're seeing of Zelios here. So what I think is kind of a big deal about this is that this is our first example of boss fights in Metroid Prime 4 that are referencing boss fights from prior games, which gives us more room for optimism that there could be other bosses coming back, especially if this one's just an early boss fight. Like, we could maybe see something like perhaps Kraid or Ridley make a return in some form, maybe a different form, but in some form in Metroid Prime 4. But now, speaking on the uniqueness of the missile we see in this footage here. The missile is yellow. It's depicted in the exact same way as we've seen before. The only difference is that it's yellow and not blue. And we see it blue in the other ad, so it's not like they just changed it throughout the course of development. This is all likely final footage, and something has changed between that Carvax boss fight and the Zelio boss fight, where Samus has gained a few more missiles, a little bit more energy, not a lot more, so still very clearly early on into the game, but the missile is now yellow. I think the obvious implication here is that Samus will be improving upon her missiles as she progresses in the game. And that may very well be the case, but there is some room for debate here, because we've actually seen from the Prime 4 Treehouse footage how the missile icon looks, and we've also seen from the Switch 2 Edition footage how the missile icon looks, and those icons are the same, and those icons are depicting a classic Metroid missile. But if you compare the symbols here, it's different from how it's now being depicted with more recent Metroid Prime footage. So at first I thought that maybe the missile upgrades as you progress into the game, but given how early on we're seeing this missile icon here, I'm actually led to believe that they just changed the missile icon later into development. That's what happened. Because the initial Switch 2 Edition footage and the Prime 4 Treehouse footage came out earlier this year, back in early April. So now, months later, we're seeing that the missile icon has changed across the board, so I think that's most likely what has happened with that. However, I am also reminded of this screenshot we have from the most recent trailer in the September Nintendo Direct, where we see that pointed missile, but it's blue, as it was earlier on, instead of yellow, as we see in the boss fight with Zelios. However, there's another weapon type with 3 circles, and then also to the left, next to the missiles, there's another option with a flame symbol, but that option is not there during the fight with Zelios. I have an idea. So, typically with the missiles, there's no need to select your missile, it's always readily accessible with the press of a button. So the fact that we see that the D-pad has a missile option leads me to believe that you're selecting a missile at certain points, it's not always readily accessible. What if, when you press right on the D-pad for the missile, you're not just selecting a normal missile, but you're powering up the missile? And maybe when you select this D-pad option, the blue missile meter turns yellow to signify that you currently have the missiles selected to be in a more stronger, prominent form. That's the best explanation I can come up with to explain why we see the yellow missile meter with this most recent commercial of this Zelios boss fight. But those are my thoughts on these recent commercials, these Prime 4 Direct rumors, and what's been going on. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget, you can use my code SLEEPRESTART when checking the link in the description below for the Manta Sleep Mask. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.